When the original colonies of America were established, there were between 10 and 75 million native inhabitants, many of whom lived in highly developed societies. Historically, Indian cultural norms and values created natural mechanisms for ensuring children's welfare and therefore the tribe's future. Although each tribe is unique, there are some commonalities across Indian nations. Responsibilities for child care and discipline were divided among many members of the community so that no single person was overburdened. Within the extended family, children were safeguarded because of the watchful eyes of the grandmothers, aunts, and others. In tribes, children were viewed as a gift of the Creator. Those parents whose behavior did not meet the community expectations were often chastised or ridiculed into compliance. Child abuse was a rare occurrence. Child rearing and discipline were never separated from the spiritual belief system. Children did not belong to one person or couple, but rather to the tribe. This continues on to this very day. Historically, the roots of the unique treatment of Indian people go back to a time before the United States was formed. When Europeans arrived on the shores of North America, they entered into wars, alliances, and treaties with its original inhabitants, the Indian nations. The United States and Indian tribes entered into treaties to cede land and make peace between the parties, to prevent tribes from entering into alliances with other European nations, and to regulate commerce between the United States and Indian tribes. A treaty with an Indian tribe is similar to a treaty between the United States and any other nation. This government-to-government relationship is explicitly contained in the U.S. Constitution and has been upheld in Supreme Court rulings. This relationship still holds true today. As the Indian Wars ended in the late 1880s, U.S. federal government policy began shifting emphasis to assimilation for Indian people, starting with the children. Boarding schools and relocation programs were early attempts to indoctrinate Indian youth into becoming members of mainstream society. Many were large militaristic institutions, where Indian language and spirituality were forbidden. Long sacred hair was cut, and European clothing was forced upon Indian children. Physical and sexual abuse within the facilities was frequent, and the children lost a sense of self and family while attending. Many of the children died while at the schools, never to return home to their families or tribes. Those who did return to their tribal communities as adults were often not able to successfully assimilate back into tribal life because they had been deprived of traditional Native role modeling in their formative years. Native Americans weren't even considered citizens until 1924, when the Indian Citizenship Act was passed in Congress. It wasn't until 1978 that Native Americans could legally practice the religious and spiritual activities as they had done since time immemorial. It's ironic that a nation formed by people fleeing religious intolerance would subject America's first inhabitants to the same intolerance and persecution that they fled from in England.
One of the things that's different for Indian people than maybe other folks is that for many of us, history is very much something that's alive. It's not something that happened in the past. And one of the things that's true for Indian people in the United States is that our federal government has kind of gone this way and that with what they think about Indian people and tribes. Sometimes they said, let's help Indian people be Indian people and let's leave tribes alone. We'll say, here's where you can live and you're a nation and we're going to leave you alone. Then other times we said, as a federal government, we think that we should assimilate Indians. Indians are something that we don't need anymore. We're going to assimilate Indians. So there's been all this policy back and forth for well over 200 years. And what happened with all that policy, some of that policy, what happened was that Indian kids were taken away from their families. There were boarding homes set up, and Indian youth who were then, at that time, they were punished for speaking their own language. Their hair was cut. There were horrible things that happened there in terms of types of abuse. And so the family structure has really been harmed.
I was 12 years old when I was taken from my parents, and I was the oldest daughter of my folks, and so I had mostly the responsibility and was very bonded to my brothers and sisters. I thought I was really afraid that we were going to be taken and separated from my siblings, like my cousins were. I had some close cousins that were taken. They were all in different homes, but we ended up in one foster home all together. And I still remember that day. It was really in the summertime, and the sun was shining and everything, and my folks went out to pick strawberries. That's how they made their living. And I was the oldest one, so I was watching my younger brothers and sisters, and pretty soon Mom and them came home. They told me to have the kids all bathed up and cleaned up, and they didn't tell us where we were going. And when they came home from work, and they told us we had to get in the car, we were going to Seattle, and we went to Seattle, and we had to sit out in the car in the sunshine and wait. And then when Mom and Dad came out, they told us we were going to go live with some other people.
In the 1950s and 60s, many Indian children were taken away from their parents under the guise of protecting them. In many cases, there was barely any due process, and Indian families were given very little help to address issues of safety for their children.
I was taken away from my mom and dad when I was 3 years old, and I remember going to Seattle and going, I didn't know where we were going. But we all got to be together. And we still lived in Muckleshoot, but then pretty soon they said, we're moving you to Tonasket where you guys won't see your mom and dad. You don't have a mom and dad. We're going to be your mommy and daddy now.
This happened with alarming frequency and became known as the Adoption Project. These children were placed into non-native homes, far from the reservations, and their heritage was left behind.
I wish they wouldn't have took us from Muckleshoot. I wish we could have stayed there. I could have learned my language.
That sounds like a real personal loss for you, not to have learned that language, because you were so tiny when you were removed. Yeah.
It's like they was trying to brainwash us that it's bad to be Indian, and it's not bad.
I was taken away as a child and gone to a residential school for 7 years. And in the meantime, I lost my culture. I was alienated from my family, alienated from the teachings, alienated from my community. And that basically formed who I was throughout those years. And admittedly, I became an alcoholic, I became a drug addict over the years, and I attribute that experience. I didn't at the time.
These children experienced a divided sense of self. They were part of the dominant society, but without a sense of identity.
So I understand that when our children are taken away, there's an emptiness within all of us. We lose our identity, and having to mix into different societies, sometimes we can't cope with that. Because if the love and the compassion that our family gives to us is not there, then our young people become so empty that they try everything in a way to kind of sometimes, subject it to suicide tendencies, subject it to alcohol, drugs, and because of the fact that there's nothing that they feel that they can live for.
These individuals experienced what is called the split feather syndrome, where a person feels split between two cultures and a yearning for part of oneself that has been severed. Those experiencing split feathers describe, an experience of growing up being different and looking different than white people, a loss of Indian identity, the loss of family, culture, heritage, language, spiritual beliefs, tribal affiliation, and tribal ceremonial experiences, the experience of discrimination from dominant culture, and a feeling like one sees the world differently than others. Indian child welfare activists right here in Washington State began laying the groundwork for a law to prevent the scooping of Indian children from their tribes. Colville tribal elder and former council chairman Mel Tenasket knows all too well the pain felt by his people.
Before I was elected to the tribal council, I worked for the BIA at the Colville Indian Agency, and I got to see some of the stuff that was going on between the BIA and the state of Washington. Our tribe was next on the list nationally to be terminated, and so we were being prepared to be assimilated into the mainstream. And so I saw and heard parents talking about losing their children before I got on the tribal council. I got elected in 1970 to anti-termination ticket. And so after we won, then we did kind of a survey to see what we were facing, where our priorities would be. You don't just win something, you got to replace it with something positive. For me personally, it was listening to the families talking about losing their children. So I personally took on the issue at home about our children being adopted out or fostered out away from the reservation, and we didn't know where they were. And so my second year on the council, I was elected chairman. And I got to be able to talk to a lot of other tribes. And we found a lot of similarities on what happened within our reservations. My tribe had lost about 300 of its children through the state. And so to me, the state was the enemy, not only in law and order jurisdiction, but in child welfare kinds of issues, state patrol. The state was my enemy. And I came to Olympia fighting the state. And in that process, I got to talk more and more to other tribes who were having troubles. And we were saying, what are our options? Now we can fight, we can continue to fight and challenge the state, or we can make an effort to change the law. And we decided that we would go and try to sell the idea that we'd change the law. Let's get a bill drafted and find some sponsors in Congress that would push a law through that would recognize tribal courts. Because we felt that if we're going to be nations, if we're going to be sovereigns like we go out and we preach that we are, then we got to act it. We've got to take on our own responsibilities for our own problems, our own children, our own elders, our own education, and so on. And so that's how I remember us getting started. We decided that we would go for legislation.
By the 1970s, Indian people were organizing with the awareness that they would need to assert themselves in order to protect that government-to-government relationship they had established with the United States. They would push the U.S. to respect their treaty rights regarding land and natural resources, and to fulfill the moral and legal trust obligation to act in the best interest of the tribes and their citizens.
And one of the efforts from Indian people who were trying to help rebuild the family, to help heal from all those kinds of harmful actions that had happened, legal actions, not just historical actions, is that the Indian Child Welfare Act got created to try and help keep Indian children in Indian families and in Indian communities.
With hard work and determination, they crafted legislation that would protect the integrity of Indian families and tribes. The passage of the Indian Child Welfare Act in 1978 by the U.S. Congress, followed by federal and state policy, requires states to work with tribes on a government-to-government basis and reaffirms that tribes have vested interest in the care and protection of their children. This gives them the right to manage or be involved in any child welfare case involving Indian children. This law fundamentally changed federal and state policies and practices and shifted substantial power from states to tribes. This jurisdiction over Indian children is a matter of tribal citizenship rather than ethnicity. This is a very important point in understanding why child welfare systems handle the welfare of Indian children differently than other children. In sum, the Indian Child Welfare Act and the associated WACs prescribe that it's in the best interest of Indian children to remain in the custody of their Indian parents, or, if necessary, with other members of their extended family or tribe, and connected to tribal communities. Any discretion by state judges in conflict with this definition of best interests would be violating the law. This law specifies that state and federal governments give full faith and credit to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of Indian tribes. States give preventative services to Indian families prior to placing children in out-of-home care. States facilitate family rehabilitation using active efforts. States return Indian children to their families whenever possible. States give preference to placing an Indian child with a member of the child's extended family, a foster home specified by the child's tribe, or an Indian foster home or institution for children approved by the tribe or operated by an Indian organization.
Anna came to us at 2.5 months old. We were not told that she was of Native American heritage. I don't think anybody knew at that time. A few weeks into the process, it was discovered that she did have Native American heritage, which changed the whole direction of her case. We didn't really understand what that meant, but we were told by the social worker that she would have to be moved into a Native home because she was of Native American heritage. And at that time, we knew that my husband was Native American, and so we contacted Bureau of Indian Affairs to get a copy of his certificate, and we were allowed to keep her.
States may enter into an agreement with Indian tribes, respecting care and custody of Indian children and jurisdiction over child custody proceedings, including agreements that may provide for orderly transfer of jurisdiction on a case-by-case basis, and agreements that provide for concurrent jurisdiction between states and tribes. States provide a higher standard of protection and preservation of Indian families and tribes to reflect the unique values of Indian culture. Determining a child's Indian heritage is paramount. Indian heritage must be screened for immediately when a case is opened.
It was a tedious process, our learning of having a Native child. There are a lot of legalities to even house an Indian child. And the whole thing was just a fluke because I happened to be Indian that they even let her in our house. Though she doesn't fit the Indian look, by blood she is. And yeah, the Welfare Act I found just hugely confusing. But as we are learning and going through it, it is there for a reason. And it's there to keep that Native culture alive in them.
To assist in determining heritage and other Indian child placement considerations, local Indian Child Welfare Advisory Committees, ICWA, have been active throughout Washington State since 1971. ICWA serves in an advisory capacity to DSHS in determining case planning for Indian children when DSHS has not been able to determine a child's actual tribal affiliation, or if a child's tribe has requested ICWA participation on behalf of the tribe. Unfortunately, recent studies conclude that Native American children are overrepresented in out-of-home care populations. Frequently, there are not enough Native homes to meet the demand. As a result, non-Native caregivers like you may have a Native child placed in your home.
I currently have 4 children in my home that I have guardianship of. 3 are from Lummi tribe and 1's from the Aleut tribe. Actually, my Aleut tribe girl, her dad was my foster child, and now I'm raising his daughter.
It's imperative that as a caregiver, you support your Native child in making and keeping cultural connections with their people.
We have gone to some powwows. One was in Seattle, and then another one was up in Arlington. The other things basically are things that I've read online. We try to do we have tapes or CDs with the tribal songs, fun kids songs that we understand parts of them. The other parts are the tribe singing and her playing her drum and looking at all of the things that we've collected for her. Her dream catcher, though she thinks it's a spider web. And then we have these that were made by family members and given as a gift. A lot of the definition at this age of 2 is way too much for her to understand right now. So we just keep it very simple. Let her look at it. To us, it's very, very precious. The family members in the past had made a little tape for her of them singing tribal songs. And so I would practice those songs with her. We love music, so we would sing those songs together.
I took him to any event we could get to. And I think sometimes people who are pre-adopt or foster parents are kind of afraid to go to powwows and stuff because they're going to lose them. And actually, I kind of thought about that too. Maybe that didn't cross your mind, but it's something that is real to us. And I found out that that wasn't so. Little by little, you make friends, and then you learn of something else that's going on, and you just join in. And it doesn't matter that if you're white at all, because if you're taking care of a Native child, you've got some Native blood there, and they want you to keep that child with their tribes. And if your child's tribe is in the Dakotas and you're out here, then you take them to what's out here. And this too will lead you to their people.
Foster kids really are challenged with trying to identify who they are in this world because of their circumstances. I mean, then you add to the element that for me, they're in a home with a white woman, and they know they're different, they look different, people know that I'm not their biological parent, that they really struggle to identify who they are, especially in their teens. And so having to know who they are is so important. And so they know where they fit in this world. So exposing them to their culture is really exposing them to who they are, or who they are as people.
Regardless of the culture, it could be any type of culture. Unless they understand where their family came from, they'll never completely be connected with who they are as adults or when they're raising their children. We all need to be rooted somewhere in something, and that's why I feel it's important for any culture to be passed on to their children.
Children need to have a strong sense of who they are in this world. It's your moral and legal responsibility, should you accept placement of a Native child, to help them grow with pride of their Native heritage. To do this, you will need the help of Native people who are willing to mentor and guide you.
What's worked for me, and I don't know how to really help someone else do that, is finding elders, Native elders, to be mentors to me. I have a couple friends that I really look to, and when I don't understand something, and go to, and be part of their families so I understand more. But you can't just say find a mentor. I mean, that's difficult to do, but I've been fortunate to have that, and that's been really helpful to me.
Know that Native tribes have a vested interest in the lives of Native children. They want to be in the lives of the children born to the tribe. It's a cradle-to-grave relationship that must be recognized and preserved.
You kind of have to be open to meeting people and finding and learning who they are so you can know what's in best interest of the child.
And as he grew, I wanted him to know his people, to know Native traditions. At that time, too, we had a lot of Native people come here for the sweats in the backyard. And so we had this weekly and sometimes twice a week sweats, and that's always a dinner and a potluck and etc. And he just naturally kind of fit into all of that. And the more I seen him and felt him, the more I knew that he had to belong to his people also, that he had a voice to put out here.
My one son said to me, my dad's here, which is an uncle who raised him. And so I have to go meet him. I have to see what kind of person he is. I have to be open-minded to be able to look at the good qualities of that person, not just the person that he was removed from, so he can see if he can have contact.
Any adoption outside of the tribe requires tribal approval. In a way, it turns out to be more like the Indian child, their family and tribe, adopt you, and not the other way around. The Indian child and their tribe are a package deal, never to be separated. There are many benefits to tribal affiliation for your native child. Youth are eligible for Indian Health Service scholarships for nursing and physician training. Various scholarships in other medical fields. Native American colleges such as Northwest Indian College, Haskell Indian Nations University, and others. Science, math, and other academic camps for youth through various universities and science programs. Culture, sports, art, and media camps geared toward Native American, Alaskan Native children. Native American, Alaskan Native mental health, substance abuse treatment. Treaty rights as may relate to hunting, fishing, and plant harvest. Eligibility for Indian Health Services. Independent living skills training and a host of other benefits, not the least of which is knowing who they are. Now that you know why Indian children are looked upon differently by child welfare systems, let's look at what it takes to become culturally competent in parenting a Native child. With the help of your social worker, find a family member that you can contact to help your child stay close to their biological extended family.
Have you ever drummed and sang before?
Yes.
Yeah.
Connect with your child's extended family to gain greater knowledge of the tribal ways known to the family. Remember, we learned in pre-service training that keeping children connected to their extended biological family is a basic competency for a foster parent. Family members can show you the way as you seek to keep your child connected.
First of all, the idea of getting together with them was very, very scary at first. But we figured, you know what, it's just we can put our limits to it. If we're not comfortable going to the house, we can maybe meet at a neutral place. But we did decide to go to their home, and it was just for a dinner because there was such a huge family gathering. There's so many of them that wanted to see her that we thought, okay, best place is there. So when we did show up, there was over 25 family members there that remember her. And we shared dinner with them, and it was just really neat because during that time, too, they would play their songs, and she would get really excited and remember that. She kept her distance, but she still remembered that, which was really neat. So, and then again, months later, they were able to come here, and we actually invited them to spend the night, which to some people that's going a little bit too far, but we were able to do that and feel comfortable enough, and it really bonded our relationship, which was really neat because, you know, we were able to sit and play games together and just have the music going and just have a connection there, which was really neat.
Gather information about the culture or I guess child you're going to get with the tribe he's affiliated with. Ask about stuff. Get well informed about it. Don't take it as a discomfort. Look to it as more of a joy and a great learning you're going to be welcoming into your home. More knowledge of the lives around you too, and the lives of the children. just get well informed about it. Talk to people. Talk to the tribal managers. Talk to the native peoples in general. Get out there and get more knowledge from the people too. Not only the research online and stuff like that in books, but get to know some people. If it's at a powwow, make some friends. They'll incorporate you into a lot of stuff. Natives always do. Oh yeah, well there's this happening next week. You should come. Get to know the people and they'll teach you too.
In our mobile society, your child may very well have multiple tribal linkages, sometimes from very far away.
It's more just of being involved and involving her. It's not necessarily her tribe that we're involving her in as much as it is the culture, the way of life. It seems to be uniform throughout the Indian nations. It's just a way they live, oneness with Earth, the believer in the great Creator. I mean, it's all pretty uniform. So I think it's important for her to understand that she has that blood in her, just to make her complete.
Learn about cultural differences between Native peoples and Western culture and in communication within the family circle, where listening tends to be the norm, rather than verbalizing.
I think, also one of the things that is true in terms of not having that strong positive connection with one's culture is, for many of us, I mean, I'm among many, we work in a mainstream society. We work in mainstream organizations or agencies for the most part. And one of the things that's true is that there's often a lack of understanding or recognition that culture exists in everything we do, everything we say, how we talk, how we approach things. Do we ask questions? Do we not ask questions? Do we look somebody in the eye? Do we not look somebody in the eye? How firm do we make a handshake? What does that handshake say about who we are or how we feel about ourselves? Well, depending on your cultural background, there's different answers to all of those circumstances. And depending on the culture, the same action can have a positive or a valued or a not valued interpretation.
Find a Native mentor for your child. This person can also mentor your learning about tribal practices, events, and etiquette.
I am able to talk with her aunt and just ask little questions. I was able to find out certain etiquette for when you go to a powwow, that it's okay to go, but you need to, for photos, you need to ask permission. You don't just go and take photos, which I wouldn't have thought of before, even though it was for good intention, it's out of respect.
Make sure that you have other people in your circle that look like your child, so that your child won't feel as if they're totally different from everyone in their world.
First time on a canoe journey.
Most tribes have websites where you can learn about upcoming events and contact information.
Individual tried permission to come ashore.
Find out what activities exist for your youth within the Native community.
Journey basic.
Yeah.
Right there.
Is regalia an important part of your child's tribal life? Perhaps canoe journeys, powwows, stick gaming, native dance groups, or drumming circles are things which they can participate in. All these things can strengthen the ties your child has with their heritage and enhance their self-esteem. If the child in your care is interested in sports, perhaps he or she can participate on Native teams and tournaments, such as basketball, softball, or baseball. Find out all you can about your child's tribal values around food, hair care, and other aspects of life. At no time are you to cut their hair without permission of the parent or social worker. Many tribes have very strong rules about the cutting of hair, as it is considered a sacred part of a person. When attending tribal activities, contribute. Don't be afraid to roll up your sleeves and pitch in to help with whatever needs to be done. Being of service to the tribe shows good intent on your part and can be a source of pride for your child as well. This is perhaps one of the more powerful ways to make connections and earn respect and trust. Tribal people will often pay close attention to what you do rather than what you say.
Let's see. Oh yeah, we're getting close.
Be aware of subtle racism that is present in our world. As much as you'd like to think that it doesn't exist, know that white privilege is very much a part of society. And though you may not be aware of it as you go about your daily life, your Indian child is likely to encounter it when not accompanied by you. Always plan for your youth's safety with subtle racism in mind.
I have seen situations where white or Caucasian parents have Native children and they've made negative comments about the stereotypes of alcoholism and Native Americans, and I feel that negativity. You know, there's a difference between knowing the reality and having some compassion for people, and then having this negativity and this racism. And so people that have that negativity and that racism kind of attitude, how do their children feel if they overhear something like that? I mean, I'm just one of those no good alcoholic natives. That's all you think of me. You know, how can a child grow up in an environment like that?
I can't tell you the number of non-Native foster parents who love their Native foster children saying, well, if I just love this child enough, it'll be okay. Don't they know I love them? And they don't realize that they walk, as the parent, walk through the world with different consequences for walking through the world than that Native child does. And that Native child needs skills and experiences to help them, not just love.
When you take in a Native child, you'll not only learn about the young person, but you'll also be given the opportunity to learn about a new culture and expand your child's network of support.
Well, 3 of my children are Lummi children, and this is an opportunity for them to connect with family in neutral ground. For some of the family that's not healthy, they can still see them and talk to them, and I know they're relatively safe. And especially since they're teenagers, they can kind of wander off and I can check in with them. But to go to someone's home is not necessarily as safe as a situation like this. And for them to be part of understanding the culture behind the whole ceremony. In fact, my daughter Lisa has been talking about wanting to participate next year. And she has a mentor person in her biological family who's taken on being a mentor to her and wanting to have her participate in things like this with her. So that's been really good. And that was me being able to say, hi, come on over, let me meet you, you know, and not being closed-minded. I knew it was a relatively healthy person, and I opened my door and said, come on over, let's get to know each other. And she wasn't willing to just take all the information from other biological families that she's just the white woman stealing my kids, because that's the dynamic that I have to overcome too. I understand where it comes from, and I understand it, and I try not to take it to heart because I know it's not true, but that's the reality.
Instead of having conflicting worlds, you can make it the best of both worlds for you and your child by understanding the responsibilities of accepting an Indian child into your home. As many can tell you, though there may be struggles, the rewards are great.
A lot of other kids don't get to do this. It's pretty good knowing that I'm the one of the chosen, like one of the few people that are like able to keep in touch and just be who I am and express it.
Culture is important to me because you know who you are and how you feel inside about yourself.
I think don't be afraid. Just go out there and do it and put your child in, get your child involved. Because if you're going to adopt one of our children, you're really the keeper of our history. And so your child has to learn his history so that he or she can go on, as my son will tell you, that he has to be the next teller.
I do get enrolled in my culture. It's very important to me. I do hold it very close to my heart. And not only for my own sake and the future's sake, but for my ancestors. For them, they did a lot to protect it too. But it's very important to us. If it's not there, then yes, there's going to be a hole. There's going to be something else there, but it won't fill the hole.
Hi, I'm Bobby Vandervoort. My husband Jason and I have been foster parents for nearly 7 years. We have fostered over 40 children. Most of these children come from very diverse cultures and backgrounds. We feel very passionate about providing them with the experience and information they need to become whole and productive adults. We, as Washington State foster parents, are so blessed to have a rich Native American culture right here at home. Please remember that all children, no matter what walk of life they may come from, require basic needs that we can easily provide them with. All children need unconditional love and full acceptance for who they are. We foster parents have a responsibility to our kids and have an obligation to our families to provide love and support to their culture and heritage. Please take advantage of the numerous tools and links that we have listed. I'm sure you'll find them helpful to support the children in your home.
If you have any questions about how to connect with Native communities, don't hesitate to call your local DSHS Indian Child Welfare Office.